keeping it morning at this point. We or what is happening across the country and in the city as the diary concern. Move on just a bit of the today. Senator C.S. Kithure in the meet with the Department on education to discuss matters security for the areas. We at the Senate to meet with KEMSA to probe irregularities of medical in KEMSA. From that, reactions from the suspension as a demonstration. Now there will be vigil in to the lawsuit protest. Follow up on political division, signing the calls for also President Uhuru Kenyatta yesterday, of course, making a stance on ongoing. But we cross over one of our correspondents. Let's get up what is happening. That's perhaps we look at the feedback from concerning our display. Why trying to keep playing says if Ruto and Kikuyu not, he will only Luos, and Limo says no. Of course, is the all calling for truth. Leaders that Raila Odinga and President William. Now we cross over to where our reporter is standing to give us an update of what from Kisii County. Good morning. If you can hear me, do bring us up to what is happening in, and probably we can look forward to news of the day.
Much Flora, meeting you very well here, Kisii County, in the middle of town, and I'm going to residents from that they be able to tell us their sentiments. The calling of Azimio by the leader who is to we say that on that day of there'll be a video flower placing and of those who lost during the Sabasa protest, Friday's protest. If you are Hilly, so that I be talk to my residents who are here at Kisii County, so that they be able to tell us what is their view, and do they think that Raila Amolo Odinga is doing this protest on his benefit, so that be able to get a handshake from His Excellency William Samoei Ruto. If you may be able to come here. Je, unaisije kuhusiana na maamuzi ya Raila Amolo Odinga katika kusimamisha maandamano haya?
Maamuzi ya kulilia wale kufa, hiyo na muunga mkono. Kwanza mimi mwenyewe natoa pole zangu kwa familia za Wakenya wote ambao wamekufa. Kuhusu hii maandamano, mimi mwenyewe nasema hivi, mtu asifikirie ni Raila anatuongoza tuende kufanya maandamano. Maisha imetufinya, sukari saa hii kilo 2 ni shilingi 500. Ule hasila mama mboga anauza mboga anapata 200. So it means afanye siku 3 ndio anunue sukari. Bwana Ruto, tafadhali na maadvisor wako, please angalia ni maisha gani Kenya imefikia. Msifikirie sisi wa Kenya tunaandamana sababu tumelipo. Mahali kiatu imenifinya ndio nanifinya, nasikia uchungu mpaka najipata kwa barabara nikiandamana. Kitu kingine ya pili, na kusauri wewe Raila Amolo Odinga, please usituputu kufanya handshake na Kenya Kwanza. Tumechua yale wametutendea kama wa Kenya, na tunashukuru Mungu akupe siku mingi ili uendelee kulilia wanyonge, na hawa matajiri wenye wanaona wamefika mbinguni, sisi tuko duniani. Siku moja na yao itawaramba. Waweke ukali yao chini, wafikirie Wakenya wale wa chini, mahasira, bodaboda, mama mboga, wanakura nini pale chini. Saa hii unga ni 240. So it means mtu wa bodaboda afanye siku 2 ndio apate unga akule. Tafadhali Kenya kuisha. Mmetumaliza bwana.
Sawa. Asante sana. Pengine tuweza kupata maoni ya mkazi mwingine hapa.
Naam, kwa majina ni Okumu Wilfred, mkazi wa Kisii. Naona kusitishwa kwa maandamano ni hali yenye itakuwa njema, na sisi angalau tupate afadhali tuweze kumona wenye walifiwa na wenzetu ambao walikuwa mashujaa katika mabarabara zetu. Ni uchumi umetufanya kujiweka katika mabarabara zetu, si eti tumechiweza. Naomba mheshimiwa Raila Amolo Odinga ukae kidete, usukumane na huyo Sakayo mpaka siku ya mwisho, ndio tupata angarau na sisi kupata afweni katika hii hali ya maisha ambayo imekuwa ngumu sana.
Naam, asante sana. Pengine tuweze kupata huyu akisimamia tu hapo, utueleze yako ni yapi na una yapi.
Asante sana mwanahabari. Kwa majina mimi ni Tom Mainya, mkazi wa hapa Kisii. Namshukuru mzee wetu baba Raila Amolo Odinga kwa kusimamisha maandamano. Yeye anaonekana is a wise man sababu amechali mwananchi wa kawaida. Vile watu wetu waliuawa kutokana na haya maandamano, kupigwa marisasi na wengine kuumia kwa njia moja ama nyingine, ilikuwa jambo la muhimu sana kuamua hivyo ili Wakenya at least wapate nafuu kwa siku moja ama siku 2 zibumue kiasi. Alafu mimi najua maandamano bado itaendelea sababu bado tuko na njaa. Asante sana mwanahabari.
Naam, asante sana. Pengine tuweze kupata mkazi wa mwisho naye atupatie maoni yake.
Mimi kwa majina naitwa Adriano Songo. Raila anapigania wananchi wote kwa Kenya wapate vitu zishuke chini. Zikishuka chini wananchi watafurahi. Na bwana Ruto na wewe sikizana na Raila, mkoe kitu kimoja, Kenya ikue nchi huru, ikue vita isikwako, ushukishe vitu chini kabisa. Hiyo ndio inatakikana Mr. Ruto na Mr. Raila. Msikizane, wananchi mshukishe vitu chini, wananchi wafurahi. Vita itapigana hata kidogo.
Sawa, asante. Pengine tuweze kupata maoni ya mwisho kabisa hapo.
Yes. Majina ni Paul Nyariki, mimi ni mkazi wa hapa Kisii County. Sasa mimi nashukuru the leader of Azimio Raila Amolo Odinga kwa kususpend hii maandamano. Angalau tupumue tuone kama hii serikali ya Kenya Kwanza itafikiria so that they can reduce the cost of living. Na hiyo ndio tunataka hii Kenya. Si eti tulikuwa tunaandamana for the shake ya kuandamana, tulikuwa tunaandamana ili serikali tusikize, ione hao wananchi ina govern wako na njaa. So mimi naunga Raila Amolo Odinga kwa kusimamisha hiyo maandamano kidogo, lakini bado kama hawatatusikiza bado itisha, kama watatumaliza hii Kenya yote watumalize. Asante.
Thank you very much, Flora Limuki. If you have heard, those are the sentiments of Kenyans from here, Kisii. Most of them are happy, and they say that this breathing time they have been given to hold on the protest, the Azimio protest, it's a good decision that Raila Amolo Odinga decided to have a hold on the protest, so that they be able to mourn some of the people who lost their lives during this protest. If I may be able to remind you that during the Sabasaba protest here in Kisii County, we were able to have 4 deaths that were reported, where one was buried yesterday and one is being buried today there at Kiombo. So this is something that we are expecting people from Kisii County will be having the vigil tomorrow here at Capitol around about in the evening of tomorrow, and even the laying of flowers. So that's what we have from Kisii County at this moment. I may be passing back the mantle to you in studio, Flora Limuki.
Thank you so much, Alfayo Kombo, for that update. And of course, residents of Kisii County, they are giving their divergent views concerning the ongoing Azimio protest. But right now, I'm joined by one of our reporters, Mike Kagongo, to just paint to us a picture of what the diary looks like for the newsroom today. Mike, good morning.
Good morning, Flora.
How are
you
you?
look good.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me this morning.
You're welcome. What are you cooking today?
Quite a number of happenings today concerning politics in the country. Remember, yesterday, former President Uhuru Kenyatta spoke to the journalists about, or editors about, what happened the day before yesterday.
Yes.
And we're also expecting more of reactions of what he said yesterday. And that's concerning President William Ruto's hitbacks to his predecessor. You remember President William Ruto day before yesterday said that whoever thinks that they are above the law must also be dealt with in accordance with the law, despite the fact that he was the President of the Republic of Kenya. Yesterday we also had Interior CS Kindiki talking about him.
Yes.
And although he did not mention former President Uhuru Kenyatta, said no one should be above the law, and whoever thinks that they are above the law must be dealt with in accordance with the law. And we are also expecting him today in the department, before the departmental committee in the National Assembly, Professor Kithure Kindiki, about the
Teachers in the ASAL areas?
Exactly. Remember yesterday he said that more than 30,000 teachers will be employed by the government as promised by President William Ruto. So we also expect, that's something we're expecting today.
Yes.
From the parliament. We're also expecting UDA party to hold press at 12 a.m. that concerns defectors from other parties. Yesterday we also saw former Kasarani MP joining UDA party, and also former President Uhuru Kenyatta's bouncer Arocho, that's a brother to our own Arocho, joining UDA.
Really?
Yeah, they are twins, by the way.
Interesting.
Yeah. So he also joined UDA party yesterday. And the press also concerns President William Ruto's visit to Mombasa. There is a meeting today at UDA headquarters. Those are leaders, UDA leadership from the coastal region will be deliberating on the president's meeting, the president's visit to the coastal region next week.
Yes.
So they are deliberating on the same. So after that, they will be holding a presser at the UDA headquarters today. So all we are also expecting is about the reactions on President Azimio coalition when they called off their protests.
Yes.
And expecting to hold vigil from Wednesday this week. So we're also expecting to understand what kind of vigil will, what do people understand about the vigils? Will they be able to light the candles? Will it be during the day? Will it be during the night? At least to mourn whoever, those that have died at the expense of Maandamano.
Yeah.
Yes.
Quite a sad story. And you are covering the Maandamano last week, sorry. How was it like from a reporter's perspective?
It's difficult to explain about Maandamano because we expect Kenyans or protesters to abide by what Azimio leaders have been calling for, to in fact hold peaceful Maandamanos or protests. But that is against, what has been happening is against the calls of their leaders. We visited Kawangware. There is a place called Mau Mau, that is a boundary of Kawangware and Kangemi. Some few vibandas were touched down by protesters, but those were just, according to residents, they say those were goons that were not even protesting.
Yes.
But we've been, not only Mau Mau area, we've been seeing these protesters lighting fires, tires, and throwing stones. That is against what Azimio leaders have been calling for during the protest. But from the reporter's perspective is that we also get very hard times in covering this kind of protests, because you see some police officers are also masquerading as journalists,
Yes.
and that is also very difficult for us.
Yes.
You see, when we are in between the protesters, they might even think we are not journalists.
Yes.
Some of them do not even understand about the cards, ID cards, presser cards.
Yes.
So they just think we are all police officers.
Yes.
From the incidents that happened last week. So we are, and that must also be one of the reasons as to why Azimio la Umoja has called off this kind of mandamanos, to at least to cover some of these journalists and also members of the public. Remember, Azimio has mentioned something that they have been doing their research about how many people have died from the protests.
Yes.
And their numbers add up to 50 individuals and adding to. So this is one of the reasons as to why they also called this protest, to understand how many people, and this, they allege that hospitals have been urged not to mention or to disclose how many people are suffering from the hospital or from the in the hospital from the protest. So it's something we also have to follow on and understand how many people exactly are in the hospital and are suffering from the protests.
Yes. It's quite sad, and we hope maybe one of the reasons that these protests should come to a halt or be done in a way more peaceful manner is because of the many lives that we're losing.
Sure.
And I take you back to the Uhuru story. You've been following closely and the issues on the Retirement Act. The former president allegedly yesterday said that is no longer receiving his retirement benefits. Perhaps you've been following up on that and the Retirement Act and all that.
Yeah, sure. About a few months ago, Gatundu South MP Gigi Kagombe filed a petition to halt all these benefits that Uhuru Kenyatta has been receiving, and also to return whatever he has received since he retired, and also Kalonzo Musyoka since he was VP. I think that has also affected Uhuru Kenyatta's retirement benefits. According to the Act, Uhuru Kenyatta must, or any person leading
any former president,
vice president must receive their benefits according to the law, the 2012 Act. But all these are political influenced.
Yes.
And we are expecting, President William Ruto, before he ascended to power, he said he's not going to revenge on whatever happened to him before he was the president. But we are seeing
You're seeing the same scenarios that we were seeing last year come
unfolding contrary to what he promised.
Yes.
So I think to cover all this, he's also going to reconsider on what is happening to President Uhuru Kenyatta. Remember, former President Uhuru Kenyatta, remember Kenyatta said yesterday, if he will be called by
the
President William Ruto, and he said, he is my president, I will gladly go. So, and that will also make President William Ruto step back a little bit about former President Uhuru Kenyatta. Yes.
Thank you so much, Mike, for that update. That's our very own reporter, Mike Kagwango, giving us an update on what our newsroom will be looking like at our 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. bulletins. Right now, we take a short commercial break. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and thank you for keeping it Morning Cafe. Of course, keep interacting with us. #Morning Cafe at TV47 News on Twitter, not TikTok, at TV47 Kenya on Facebook. You know, you're having a conversation on TikTok here, so I think it's still in my mind right now. Of course, send in your feedback concerning the conversation that we are having. But right now, let me look at some of the trends on Twitter, as well as, of course, Twitter X trending at #1 because of the change of logo from the Bad app to now an X. My co-host here, Stanley, was telling me it's literally going back to your X. But away from that, just trying to some feedback. Of course, the issue of Sudan trending as well, and Pauline Njoroge. Let's see what people are saying here. Stephen Mutoro says, on Pauline Njoroge, police handling the entire criminal justice system is certainly on the cross. ODPP Kenya ranks worst as an embarrassment to the taxpayer. They made her a celebrity on sensational charges that were hastily dropped. Sufficient investigations should inform arrest moving forward. Just checking up on what people are saying here concerning the release of Pauline Njoroge. The senator for Nairobi says, I laud that magistrate in Malindi for handling the charges against Pauline Njoroge with utmost contempt. I'm also proud of Law Society for putting lawyers in ODPP Kenya who have gotten their oath as advocates on notice. Away from that, just trying to sample some feedback here. Guna Miguna says, I'm still laughing. You mean the ODPP has no one, not one individual, who is capable of drafting a legitimate competent charges sheet against mine and Njenga and Njoroge and co. And yes, just trying to look at what people are saying on Twitter concerning that release, among other arrests that have been happening throughout this week. That is just some of the feedback from Twitter, but perhaps I could want to hear what my partners here in the studio have to say about that. It's a hot topic on Twitter for the last 1 week.
Yes, thank you, Flora. And of course, we're just looking at some of the trends and talking about #Twitter X. That's what everyone is talking about. I don't know. Do you even looking at the logo, does it even look like it was much thought about? I think someone just scribbled something. Yeah. Because you see, Twitter itself was a brand. Are we even from the blue bad?
It had a meaning, you know, a bad tweeting.
Yes. So even the term tweeting,
yeah.
Twitter Spaces, all these things probably will have to change. Probably in a casual manner going through this trend, but surely this is something that's going to change a lot. Something like Facebook has maintained its look for the longest, and Facebook was perhaps, I think, the oldest social media site. For Twitter to come, and it was probably the second biggest, at least in Kenya, to change that brand, it means the interactions change, and this coming only 2 weeks after the launch of Threads.
Yeah.
It changes a lot. Do you think that probably Elon Musk is feeling the pressure from the competition?
He definitely is. I mean, even after Threads, you know, came along. For me, as a big user, and even Flo is even the biggest user amongst us.
Freddie here has like the whole nation following you.
Well, they do follow me, but I think they're more interested in your conversations than mine.
Twitter has, how it is set up, you can find a very, important conversation even the sites, you're going to government sites, it is verified.
Yes.
But then when Threads came along, it was, if you ask me, it was a whole Gen Z kind of, Twitter. Because I mean, Twitter isn't really for if you have a soft soul. You come into Twitter and
But you see,
it is hard conversations there.
Yes,
Threads,
but over the last few months or so, when more and more Kenyans got onto Twitter, even the conversations changed. Even the quality of conversations changed.
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
If you scroll through the threads on Twitter, and you find that even some of the conversations, especially within the Kenyan space, they've really deteriorated over the last 6 months or so. Previously, as you were saying, and rightly so, the level of discourse and discussions on Twitter was actually at a different level.
Yeah.
In fact, many people said, I do not understand Twitter because it's too serious. People talk about serious things, proper news and stuff like that. But nowadays, this is a proper tweet. It is just anything you need to say, a short sentence that has no end or beginning, getting into some spaces that are not so appropriate, sharing images that are not so appropriate. That is what I'm seeing more and more on Twitter. And definitely it raises concern. And that's the reason why more people, I feel, moved to Threads immediately that platform was available. But just an update for those, because even at 6 when we started the show, it said that the change of logo was available only on PC and some other computers. Now I can see even on my mobile version, the X is there. The bird has already left. So
is it?
Yes, if you check your phone right now, the blue bird is gone. And it's just a funny looking X.
I'm pretty sure our director, Nick Mavindi, as a proud Luya, is wondering, where did this bird go without us jarring it?
No, someone, exactly. someone must have gotten away with the bird.
And then there's a very funny meme of that bird beside the X saying, I've been fired. It looks so funny. I wish we could have gotten it, but probably we'll show our viewers sometime.
So what if you're not tweeting, what are you doing?
You're Xing? I don't know.
Oh my.
Because it changes the whole concept of Twitter.
Yes.
Yet I can see those terminologies, tweeting are still there, Twitter spaces and all this. It will definitely take a while before we can actually move.
Are you Xing? It's Xing. You're Xing.
Okay. I think we'll leave that to Elon Musk. But then if you ask me, Musk is one gentleman who changes things, he likes to, revamp things every now and then when it comes to Twitter. Some months ago, we did see the whole issue of verified accounts, and you really have to pay for it, and you really had to force big accounts. I'm talking about government accounts, even personalities who had a huge following, who had verified accounts, but then they really had to pay for it. But later on, he said, okay, for government agencies, Twitter is going to pay for you. And this brought about, misinformation, disinformation, because a government site that doesn't have the verification, then it can be, I mean, even for someone like Larry Madowo, a form,
people really had a field day informing the accounts.
I think
that day.
Finally, on that question of what will these things that you do on Twitter called, I finally found it on the BBC, where they described that the new white X on a black background has replaced the blue bird. Now, they're quoting Elon Musk, and it says, tweets will also be replaced, according to Twitter's owner, Elon Musk, and posts will now be called X's.
Oh, no.
So whatever you're doing on Twitter now, okay, not on Twitter, on X, is Xing. You're not tweeting, you're Xing.
Oh, my God. It sounds so weird. It will take some time before you get used to it.
Xing on X.
Hopefully you don't find your X in X.
Oh, that would be interesting.
You'll always run into them.
All right. Our director, Dick, he was quite interested in the first bit of review of the cartoon. I don't know if we can have the For People Daily on the screen also, but even as we look at the cartoon review for the Daily Nation and the Standard, remember we had asked you to also chime in on how the previous one, how the People Daily, but you have this.
Yes, I do have the the director on this standard, and probably was to talk about some news making headlines scene. It paints a picture of what the whole Russia and contractor company that's involved in the whole Prigozhin, his whereabouts are still not yet. There's a video last week. He troops and he'll no longer be taking part in Ukraine. Troops will be heading to, which raises when you people 25 taking part in the war now saying that they're what exactly are they coming?
This comes on the backdrop days to Africa Summit.
And you see, initially when we heard about it was about their involvement in Sudan. Yes, because they were doing some things in Sudan. I think there was a project that they were working on, or they were involved, or they were hired as mercenaries, or as an extra military unit for the government in Sudan. And they were, to some extent, involved in the current issues in Sudan. Interestingly, we see even on X's and on the international media. Okay, it was on Twitter before it changed into X. And we've seen the Sudanese military general there accusing our own president of mercenary-like actions. And it is a bit worrying because you wonder, okay, what exactly do we have a problem with Sudan? You remember yesterday when we were talking about Kenya's foreign policy, and this is something that we'll definitely need to have a discussion on. Kenya's dalliance with Iran, Kenya's working with Russia, Kenya working with China, President Ruto looking to the West, the US, the UK, and we're still not sure what's happening. Now, we hear the Sudanese military general saying, we do not want your intervention here. And it is a bit worrying because we still do not understand Kenya's involvement in this whole conflict.
Exactly. And then also, I think perhaps even beyond trying to form a relationship with the West and the Asian countries, might it be time also for African nations to come together and also be strong as a continent? But then when you see all these sibling rivalry between Kenya and Sudan, Kenya and Somalia, Kenya and Tanzania, it really doesn't give any hope of changing that, because since President William Ruto came into power, he has pretty much kind of been trying to be the voice for the African nations. But we hope with time we can be able to manage to get to that point and perhaps even have our own currency. We wouldn't be struggling with the whole dollar issue if we had an afro, maybe.
Very interesting conversation.
And this reminds me, on the 16th of July, in Gigiru, Nairobi, President William Ruto was, hosting a number of delegates for the AU Media, conference, and such kind of talks were really there. Matters peace, as much as he really largely talked about climate change and all this. There's also the whole talks of, peace and all that, even with the AU calling for African countries to, give this particular, call for countries to, send aid to Russia, rather not Russia, Sudan.
Okay, and it will be interesting to see what kind of response, because we do definitely expect a response from Kenya, from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, or even from State House, with regard to that direct accusation to our president, with regard to the conflict in Sudan, at least even in as far as clarifying our involvement there, so that we understand, okay, this gentleman from Sudan is talking this way because this is what is happening. Because as it is right now, if you ask any Kenyan, what is our involvement in the Sudan conflict, no one understands. Yet our president's name has been mentioned directly.
And not once.
Not once.
Times, yes. And still on matters international, away from matters Kenya, though, even as I take you through this, you'll see a number of Kenyan traits, if you like, and what is happening in Kenya really happening in Israel. So there's a whole, right now, Israel faces a constitutional crisis after Parliament passed a key part of the government's changes. So basically now, it says legal action, a general strike and possible refusal from upwards of 10,000 military reservists to report for duty are now on the cards as Israel's largest ever domestic crisis enters a new chapter. Over the weeks, we've seen a number of protests and protesters thronging the streets in Israel. And this reminds me back in, and actually, before that, when they were voting for this, the members of parliament, they had a whole 64 against, 0. It was a whole clean. That was, for the government side. And every member of the coalition voted in favor, while the opposition lawmakers abandoned the Knesset plenum in protest. This reminds me back during the voting of the finance bill right in Kenya, a number of opposition lawmakers, said, walked out and had a whole stage out from the parliament buildings, and they said we're not voting for this. And this is really interesting how Kenyan politics and even politics really, even in the African setup, plays a huge part outside there.
Yes, it's an opportunity to draw parallels with the situation in Kenya, especially with the protests that we're witnessing locally. There's been a lot of argument on whether or not they're legal, what kind of action, what exactly does it mean to protest, and what kind of reaction you expect from the anti-riot police. We've seen what happened in France, and with protests there turning almost violent in some cases. And in Israel, on this matter that you're talking about, the Israeli police clashed with crowds of protesters at night. Remember, some of these protests were taking place at night after Parliament adopted a highly controversial law to limit the Supreme Court powers, and police in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv used water canyon to disperse protesters blocking highways. So it is interesting if we could draw parallels on how protesters in Kenya behave. I know there's a lot of throwing of stones in the Kenyan situation. I've seen some photos from the Israeli protests, people waving flags, and thousands just walking onto the streets. And of course, police reacting to that as well. And in France, the same happening. So definitely, we are not alone in some of the issues we see happening.
We are only alone in terms of how we are doing it.
Yes.
And I hope moving forward, you can see a little bit more peaceful demonstrations. And still on that protest, as we wrap up, I see sibling rivalry. Is Kenya losing investment deals to Tanzania? 3 billion shillings estimated to losses business for every day of the street protest, even as Kenya projects a 5.6% growth in terms of GDP.
All right, it is about that time.
It has been. And thank you so much for keeping us company from 6 a.m. till now. We do this again tomorrow morning. And of course, keep your feedback coming. The social media handles, Flora will definitely share with you. I can only tell you on Twitter @FredIndimuli.
On X.
On X.
On X.
Oh yeah, on
X. On X.
You can X me.
It will take a whole time, by the way, to hopefully I don't.
You can X me on X.
Yeah.
FredIndimuli.
If you're my ex, don't X me on X.
Interesting.
And I'm yours truly, Stanley Nyerungita. 22047 is where you get us SMS number at TV47. Use mine at Nyerungita _ on X. Let's do this again tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Goodbye.
And my name is Flora Limuki. Thank you for keeping